thank you for staying with us. It's now time for us to bring you the newspaper review this morning, 2nd day of January 2024, and I'm sure it's his first debut this month of January 2024. We have our reviewer here, Abdulmajeed Dahir. Happy New Year.
I wish you the same. And I hope it will be a very happy New Year.
I hope so.
We are hoping for a very happy one.
Thank you very
A
much.
New Year that is happy.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's start.
Not just the cliche.
All right, let's start with leadership, Mr. Kunle.
Yes, leadership newspapers. That's what we're starting with. Tinubu cuts borrowing, signs 28.7 trillion naira 2024 budget. Deficit lower at 3.8%. NAS vows strict oversight on implementation. It ends controversial ways and means borrowing. That's on page 4 of the leadership newspaper.
All right, let's see the next newspaper. The Daily Sun looks at Pope wades into Plateau attacks. Governor declares 1-week mourning. Catholic pontiff describes killing in Nigeria, harrowing mounts prayer for country, but high expectations as Tinubu signs 2024 budget into law.
This Nigeria, 2024, poverty, hunger, insecurity are big issues that will shape the year. World Bank projects rising inflation in 2024. Naira's free fall, worst ever in 2023, experts remark. Urgent need to step up war against terrorism, kidnapping, oil theft. All of that you can find on pages 4, 18, and 20 of this Nigeria. And just beside the masthead, more mining licenses to be revoked in 2024. That's credited to the Minister of Solid Minerals, Oladile Alake. You find that also on page 19.
And People's Daily this morning, New Year, enemies wanted to destroy our joy with Plateau State killing. That's coming from Khan. But you also want to look above that. PDP wraps Tinubu's New Year address, calls it harvest of deceit, empty claims on page 6, with other stories bottom page. And I think we also see no approval granted for new electricity tariff, and that's coming from NEC. I will justify the trust Nigerians placed on me, and that's coming from Tinubu. My appointees will not give excuses for poor performance, coming from Mr. President. So, Alaji, well, a lot of stories this morning. I think focus starts on the budget, and then, of course, goes to the Pope's statement, and then comes back to Mr. President saying that Nigerians will definitely see the outcome of the trust bettered on him. But let's see where you want to start from.
It's a new year, and we hope that this year will be better than the outgone year in every respect, in every aspect of our socio-economic lives. And leadership, the political leadership of Nigeria has a responsibility across all tiers of government and all arms of government too, to make sure that they fulfill the primary mandate of government, and which is the security and welfare of citizens. As an expression of their commitment to doing this, we've seen the President sign into law the Appropriation Act for 2024 as passed by the National Assembly. And we hope and pray that it will be implemented in a manner that will yield the necessary change in line with their manifesto and campaign promises. Even though optimism is quite low, because the signing into law of the budget has been a yearly ritual since 1999 that appears not to have yielded much results. So it is usually greeted with fanfare, ceremony, but at the end of the day, you begin to wonder where all the monies were budgeted for went to. And so we hope that we'll see changes this time around. We've heard from the Minister of Finance. He has given assurances of a paradigm from the past, and we hope that that will be affected in the implementation of the budget. So at this point, we can only preach hope and optimism while calling on the leadership to make sure that they meet that hope and optimism with expectations of the people.
Yeah, well, I think it's also the first time in a long time that the budget was signed into law on the very first day of the year. A lot of the times you have the budgets of the previous years extended into the new year by like 3 months.
Yes.
But on the 1st of January 2024, the President signed it into law. Now, for me, I'd like us to talk about the fact that the President has caught borrowing borrowing was a major problem for the government in the past 8 years, and Nigerians have complained that there's so much borrowing.
Yes.
There will be borrowing this year, but not as much as previous years. What are your thoughts?
Okay, two things. I think the fact that we are borrowing less this year from what from the feelers we're getting from stakeholders in the economic sector appears to be because of Nigeria's current level of unsustainable indebtedness. So I think a lot of people are actually wary of advancing us loans from the usual quarters. I think that's one factor, not necessarily because we're not willing to take more loans. And I'm saying this because the economic practice of borrowing was an orthodoxy that was propagated over time, and it was swallowed hook, line, and sinker by the previous administration. And that is the fact that there's nothing wrong with borrowing, and that as long as we borrow to do infrastructure. But 8 years down the line, we've seen that the borrowings to do the so-called infrastructure has not improved the socio-economic lives of Nigerians. Nigerians are poorer even today than before. And those projects are not able to pay for the loans. And so you begin to wonder whether this orthodoxy itself does not need more interrogation with a view to actually reforming them so that we can have healthier and more constructive economic conversations. So for me, for us to escape the debt trap that we're already into, is to have a complete rethinking of our economic system. And I cannot say this enough. The idea of borrowing to do infrastructure, for example, is a flawed economic concept. Because what you call infrastructure are not in the real sense capital projects. They are more social and politically motivated projects that simply shows government presence, and not real capital projects that are able to repay these loans. So for me, if we had prudent management of our resources, our available resources, government will be able to carry out basic infrastructural projects without borrowing. And if government must borrow, it is to borrow to do businesses. You have to borrow to invest in enterprises that can yield profit enough to repay back their loans, which is standard practice globally. So I would rather the government borrowing money, for example, to establish a refinery that can pay back these loans as a commercial enterprise, create jobs, and actually exports its products. Also provides import substitution for imported PMS. We would like to see state governments, for example, that have been given the constitutional powers to generate and distribute electricity in their various states. So yes, if they must, go and get loans to establish power companies that can actually power your states and make profit from it, commercially viable power projects. So we want to see investments in critical sectors of the economy that are capable of yielding profit enough to pay back these loans. And so that is why I've always been an apostle of government having business in business, for instance. So you borrow to do business. You don't borrow to begin to construct roads and construct houses or so-called capital expenditure. You cannot borrow, you cannot pay back those monies.
All right. So let's look at. I mean, I'm interested in that story. Still looking at our finances under leadership, it sort of brings some level of review to past leaderships. I mean, Obasanjo bequeathed over $31.5 billion in CBN reserve when he was leaving. Yar'Adua opted by $40 billion. Jonathan 28 point. But when you look at our foreign direct investment into Nigeria, declined by $470.8 million. And then you look at where we are. Little wonder you say they're not going to borrow us money because, we just don't want to ask, but because they are a bit weary. So where do we go from there? Because I hear you say channel those funds to the right thing, but I'm talking about the culture, the habitual sense of wanting to take money and not using it for the right thing. How do we correct that character trait?
I think it's a deliberate political process that can correct the problem of endemic corruption in Nigeria. I say this because in Nigeria, corruption has a major problem, and that is legitimacy problem. Corruption is legitimate in Nigeria because it is actually forged in identity politics. And so corrupt practices like nepotism, cronyism, favoritism, which eventually nosedives into economic and financial crimes, are legitimate cultural tools to extract from the national cake to the various sections of the country with those extracting it as the biggest beneficiaries. So you need a deliberate political process that changes this, and it will require the current set of political leaders committing class suicide. That is, take that decision to forego, to let go your privileges of corruption, of corrupt enrichment, your privilege of abuse of power and impunity without being held accountable. It's something like that that is a norm in Nigeria. We're helpless. We can't even hold them accountable. But I think it is time for them to take that decision on their own to say, look, we want to deliberately put an end to this because it's no longer sustainable. The system can no longer contain our excesses. And Nigeria is on a slippery road to state failure. So before this house collapses on all of us, we as the leaders, we want to deliberately put an end to corruption. And that's why whatever the president and his supporters keep talking about him being courageous in taking the bold step of removing subsidy from petrol and unifying the exchange will lead to the devaluation of the naira. I said, no, those are not bold steps. There's nothing courageous about abdication of responsibility, of providing energy security for citizens and stability of currency for citizens too. There's nothing courageous about it. That is the easiest thing to do. What would have been courageous for the president to do was to take that decision to commit class suicide, which has not been able to do.
Look at the revelations from CBN and MFL.
Exactly, of the past administration.
Yes.
But one thing I can assure you is, it's not enough to just review what has happened in the past, what is happening in the present. After all, we also saw the same inquisition against the previous administration by the immediate past administration, when we saw a lot of stories about arms deals and corruption tales. But that didn't stop them from doing their own. So it's like it's a revolving door of corruption where somebody comes and points a finger at the previous administration and then continues on the same path. So we want to see a deliberate process now that puts an end to corruption. A deliberate process that begins to reform this country institutionally enough to make it productive and profitable for citizens and government. As it stands, Nigeria is an enterprise that is running at a loss because of gross mismanagement and inefficiency of its managers.
You talked about class suicide.
Yes.
Are you sure the political class is ready for that?
That comes a time in the life of every nation where the political leaders must be ready and must take that as a necessary step for their own self-preservation. I say this because Nigeria is right now just buying time. It is like we are sitting on a ticking time bomb that can explode at any time. You can't have a situation as we have in Nigeria and expect something not to happen, something not to change. I keep describing our political leaders as drunken sailors in charge of a sinking ship. Now the question will be, how long will those on board the ship watch helplessly or hopelessly seeing their ship sunk by the leadership inertia of those that are in charge? So it's something that they must take note of. You see, I don't know why they're not hearing or seeing the signs around them that the profligacy, the wastages, the corruption is no longer sustainable. Our political leaders have become like celebrities. I mean, look at their social media pages.
And their lifestyling.
Their lifestyling. They are competing with your well-known.
And the entertainers and then the
as
limelight.
though that is their mandate in government. You see it everywhere. They celebrate their current positions as though it's like a triumph. It's something that has given them access to the best of life, which is not supposed to be so. So that tells you that they are currently in a drunken stupor, and they do not seem to realize that people are getting provoked. And for how long are you going to continue like this in a country that is bedeviled by the twin evils of heightened insecurity and abject poverty? When you talk about economic dislocation, it's simply abject poverty. People are hungry, people are pauperized, people are traumatized. And so it has to come from them. Otherwise, the history has taught us that when you have a situation like this, something will happen. Nobody knows the dimension it will take. Nobody knows how it will happen, but definitely it cannot continue like this. So why not have a guided transition from this phase to the next one that is desired for all of us by those that are in charge? It has to be a deliberate process. But I do not see that happening yet. I do not see that.
All right, so let's look at, one of our lead stories this morning also takes us to the mourning, 7 days mourning that has been instituted by the governor of Plateau State. Pope wades into Plateau attacks, and that's Daily Sun. Governor declares 1 week mourning and describes killing in Nigerian harrowing, mounts pressure for prayer for the country.
What we need now is less of prayers and more of bullets. We cannot continue to throw up our hands in indignation when such killings happen. And when you hear state governments or state governors, you hear statements from the presidency, you hear statements from the leadership of the military, you begin to wonder whether Nigeria is under siege and then those that are supposed to protect us are helpless. You hear them making some kind of statements that are uncertain, that are not reassuring, that seems to show
resignation.
Yeah, as though we are at the mercy of a stronger force than the state. And that is itself is again a clear indication of a failing state. What we need in Nigeria, Plateau particularly, is for the state to reemerge forcefully and defeat its rivals that are trying to challenge its monopoly of the use of force. And when I see military chiefs talking about the devil, when I hear military chiefs talking about blaming everything but themselves, it's so funny. And are you not worried as a Nigerian that more than a week after this attack took place, we've not gotten a definite statement from either the military or even the state government, or in fact, or the federal government, as to who was responsible for the slaughter of over 100 people? Nigeria is the only country where a crime of such magnitude happens, and it is blamed on unknown gunmen. Nobody is able to name other individuals or groups that are suspected to be responsible for this. And a firm resolve and a pledge and a commitment to say, we are going after them. We've tracked them to so and so place. Whether they are from within or outside, we've been able to get all of the information, and we are going after them. And it should happen again. As we speak, we don't even know who was responsible for the slaughter in Plateau.
At some point last week, the governor did say that the attackers were occupying some schools in the area.
Who are the attackers? Who are they? What are they? Where did they come from? When the genocide took place in Rwanda, we were told that it was Hutu militias that descended upon their Tutsi compatriots, right? Right now in Gaza, we are seeing a war going on between Israel and Palestine, and we are told that was because Hamas, as a group, a Palestinian militant group, attacked Israel. And Israel is also doing what? Doing a counterattack right now in Gaza that is almost becoming genocidal. At least we know the actors, we know what is involved. So if you want to solve the problem, you know who to talk to. So again, the question is this: who is responsible for Plateau attacks? What group or individuals? What is the motivation? How come a government cannot tell us in straight terms who was responsible? When 9/11 attack took place in the US, within 48 hours, America was telling us the identities of the people involved, their
profiles,
and ended up bulldozing through countries to show their anger. So what I'm saying in essence is, who are the attackers? Who are the occupiers? What are they occupying those places for? Is it to sell bread? Is it to sell pure water? Is it to do what? What is the motivation?
What's the purpose?
And so when the government cannot even tell you, is so afraid, cannot even tell you who are the attackers of his own people. And we're hearing it's politically motivated, is this, is that, and so many other long stories. Then it tells you that something is really, really, really wrong. And all of us must be very, very worried. And to make it worse, I've seen security chiefs call meetings of communities in some of these trouble spots, Southern Kaduna, Jos, and some other places, telling them, preaching peace to them and saying they should try to live with each other as brethren. Now the question is this: if these people you've called for these meetings are responsible for the killings, as security chiefs or security organizations, why are you not arresting them and prosecuting them for crimes against the state? Why admonishing them to stop, to change, and have a change of heart? Okay, now that the attack has taken place again, why have you not gone to arrest them for refusing to heed to your plea for a change of heart? That is because those you have been calling for meetings are not the ones responsible for the attacks.
So do you agree with Khan when they say that Nigeria's peace is very fragile and we are actually, tipping to the edge?
No, we are. I mean, that is stated the obvious. When you call a group of people, I don't know the security approach that necessitates this. You call meetings of people of different communities you suspect are warring, right? And you tell them to preach peace. Then the question is this: these people I'm seeing in these meetings, these elderly people, are they the ones carrying AK-47 to go and slaughter people in hundreds? Are these people? Now the problem is this: most people take ownership of these crimes unconsciously because when a particular ethnic group is attacked, some of that ethnic group that feels hurt by this other ethnic group will have this sense of fulfillment that somebody has dealt with them. And when some other ethnic groups also attack this other ethnic group, some other people feel like, hey, somebody has also helped me to deal with them. Now, unknown to us, armed groups are playing ping pong with our lives and our national security. The man who has gone to slaughter 165 people, only he and his goons know the reason why they are doing that. For you to sit down as a security chief or a head of a security operation, to assume that you actually know the reason why they are slaughtering people, and then you're calling people that share maybe ethnicity with them to admonish them to embrace peace, it's something that you have done over and over again and has not yielded results. So your responsibility as security agencies is to track down anybody, irrespective of the ethnicity, religion, or cultural occupation, anybody that has raised AK-47 or any such weapons against citizens of Nigeria and the state. It's your duty to track them down. You don't have a business calling for meeting or peace meeting. This talk about kinetic and non-kinetic approach, I've said it severally. The responsibility for non-kinetic approach to security is good governance by political leaders. But as security agencies, your own is to do kinetic approach to security. Go after those that are going after our lives and properties. It's as simple as that. So these meetings must stop. If you think that these people are responsible, please go after them. Stop calling them for meetings. And again, one of the solutions in the immediate that has to be applied is to put the people themselves in charge of their own security in these very critical times. I heard the Army Chief of Staff saying that it does not support arming of citizens. It will lead to anarchy. Well, Mr. Chief of Army Staff, there's already anarchy. I don't know what more can be more anarchy than the killing of 165 people without one person being arrested with links to that crime. What more could be anarchy than what we already have? We already have anarchy. And to solve this anarchy is to allow people the capabilities at self-defense. And it can be done under a controlled structure. I know I've suggested that, look, the various vigilante groups that are being formed by state governments, which must include all ethnic groups in those states as a condition. All ethnic groups, all cultural and economic groups must be included as law-abiding citizens in such security networks. But these people must be collapsed into the civil defense, where they begin proper training and monitoring with the right caliber of ammunition and arms to protect their communities. They must be the first responders when attacks happen. So that by the time conventional forces are coming, at least lives would have been saved. And each time you have communities able to defend themselves or repel attacks, and these attacks will reduce because people now know they don't have the monopoly of taking lives.
Violence, yes.
Yes. But the more you delay this, the more lives are lost. You said that you don't have enough troop numbers.
Okay.
And that the terrain is difficult. So allow those that are embedded in that terrain to at least be able to hold firepower against assailants before you arrive there due to the difficulty of the terrain. The more we delay this, the more lives are lost. With the countries at war, such as we have in Nigeria, conscription of citizens into the armed forces to expand troop numbers for the purpose of containing enemies is allowed. So this is a form of conscription that must happen now. Okay, to make it safe, you can start with ex-servicemen, ex-policemen, ex-soldiers that are domiciled in this community. You
who already have the training.
You can start with this set of people. But the difference is that the burden of their equipment, their welfare, and their training will be borne by the state governments using their security votes. Particularly in these frontline states like Plateau, Southern Kaduna, Zamfara, and entire Northwest, and of course the Northeast. We want to see that happen. And a number of governors have indicated that there is a need to actually equip these vigilante groups with the right caliber of arms. The late governor of Ondo State, who was like the architect of the Amotekun security network, which has proven to be very potent, had actually written to say, look, allow us equip these people with the right caliber of arms so that they can do better than they're doing. It's same thing with the civilized JTF in the Northeast. So you form vigilante groups that are carrying sticks and dame guns against people that are carrying RPGs and sophisticated weapons. How do you intend to secure communities? You're only endangering the lives of both the communities and the members of the vigilante. So we need to do something urgently to save lives. So it's not about prayers or admonitions for peace.
Let me ask you to tie this headline on the Daily Sun, the front page. Northern Elders Forum rates Tinubu above Buhari in fight against banditry, which is on page 29 of that paper. How does that tie with all of this analysis you just made?
It's trying to compare rotten mangoes and rotten apples. How do you begin to compare
Two things that are rotten?
It's so, I don't know what, I think Northern Elders Forum should do less of politics and face the real issue. Stop these unnecessary comparisons. The last administration failed to secure lives and properties as promised in 2015 for 8 good years. It became worse under that administration. The current administration is not doing anything new, anything markedly different from what was done in the past. And we need to hold them accountable. You cannot compare an ambition under whose watch. In one single attack, over 100 people were slaughtered, and you are telling me that the one before it was better. Why are we having this kind of why are we comparing tragedy of numbers? So please let us focus on the issues. The government must wake up. Look, it is not actually very right, looking at the optics, that our president hasn't visited Plateau. Not only that, in his New Year broadcast, there was no mention of the tragedy that took place on the Plateau, leaving people to speculate that probably it was a recorded broadcast. But having had such tragedy happen, there was nothing wrong with actually carrying out an adjustment in that broadcast to include this particular issue. I don't know, for a 15-minute broadcast, it can be done anyway. We've not seen the president show leadership in this direction. We've not seen him make up his mind on what to do with a new strategy towards combating terror and insurgency in this country. We've not seen it at all. And something has to change. For me, and I must say this, in the last administration, we had a problem that was associated with activities of marauding killer headsmen. And it appeared as though the former president, who shared ethnicity with this group, was a little bit ambivalent, or saw them as freedom fighters of some sort, and so didn't take adequate actions when he was supposed to take it until he became a full-blown security cancer. Now, my suspicion is also that, along the same line, the current president, who is a politician to the core, may also be afraid of taking certain kind of steps against this same group because of the fear of losing election in 2027. Maybe he doesn't want to offend certain sensibilities. I've heard the vice president talking about the Pulaku solution or the Pulaku initiative, which is like a cultural solution on appeasement of a group that is actually terrorizing this country, beginning from their homeland in the Northwest. So this continuous politicization of national security is what has led to government inertia in this regard. That is why the federal government, the army authorities, and the state government cannot actually tell us who was responsible for what has happened in Plateau up till now. Nigeria is the only country I know where such magnitude of crime can take place. And nobody can tell you who was responsible. Nobody can even tell you who was suspected to be responsible. We are all being politically correct by not saying it as it is. So this is the challenge. So until we place national security above partisan politics, we may not have a headway. And this government does not seem to be ready to do that. At least not yet.
And, I know that you remember the quote of late General Sani Abacha, who said that any insurgency that lasts more than 24 hours, that definitely a government official has a hand in it. And we've seen the conspiracy theory wound around this and whether people should invade Mahanga Forest close to Jos and all of that theory. But like you say, until they get the box rolling.
Even though the Sani Abacha statement has also been classified as like a euphemism to say, look, when government cannot solve a problem, it probably has certain interest that is making it unable to do so. Because, remember not the last administration, Nnamdi Kanu was hibernating in Kenya. The government was able to go to Kenya and bring him down to face trial. The same government was able to track down Sunday Igboho when Igboho carried out his attacks on some Fulani communities in the southwest. Without killing one single soul, but he disrupted people's lives, which he was not supposed to do because the people he went to attack are suffering citizens like all of us. But for that offense he committed, that offense, the full weight of the law and the full might of the state was deployed against him. He had to flee Nigeria. He was tracked down in Benin using diplomatic channels, and he was put on trial in that country. If this government can do all of that,
and he served the jail term.
He served the jail term. If the government could do this, why is this government and the one before it unable to tell us who came into Plateau to attack and kill people in numbers as high as 165? Something is wrong.
All right. Thank you so much, Abdulmajeed Dahir. I'm sure that the presidency is hearing, and on touch of that mention of the attack in Plateau also comes in line with a lot of people's comments on social media yesterday. But we'd like to thank you for joining us, and of course, this is your first day in the new year. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll move on after this break to talk about the 2024 budget, looking at the highlights. And our guest is already in the studio, Eze Onyekwere, the lead director of the Center for Social Justice. He's here with us, and we'll be talking to him after this break.